Welcome to the Scottish Watches podcast, now available in video. We have got a returning guest, somebody that's not been on the show for a number of years, somebody that joined us way back when Scottish Watches was a mere couple of episodes in. When we were approaching half a decade, that is a long time, half a decade, nearly 500 episodes, we've had a whole slew of guests. Some have returned, some haven't, some we've scared away, some have never darkened our door again. But it's my pleasure to reintroduce perhaps to an old audience member or to introduce to our new audience member since the first time, Mr. Justin Hast. How are you doing, sir?
Ricky, it's an absolute pleasure to be with you again. I didn't believe I would get a call up again, and I'm very grateful, so thank you.
Yeah, it has been a number of years, and I can't actually remember what we chatted about the first time because it was so long ago. It was around about pandemic time. You were in another world, another universe of what you were doing. We were just baby saplings, growing, nurtured in the wilderness. And now here we are, as I say, 5 years, 500 episodes almost deep in this whole podcasting and now YouTubing world. But we've caught up in real life a number of times. I remember you coming up for the Vacheron Constantin boutique launch. That was in Edinburgh, end of 2021. Then we caught up earlier this year at Watches and Wonders. We had a great chat on the shuttle bus from the hotel across to the event itself. And that's where I picked up your genuine enthusiasm that has remained consistent over the years for watches, watchmaking and new releases. I saw the glint in your eye because you checked your PDFs that's what I said there, in the morning on your email, and then you were looking forward to going and checking out these watches in real life at the event itself. And you're one of the good guys, you're one of the journalists, the media folks that doesn't just take a PDF and some rendered pictures and talk about it. You do your due diligence, you burn the shoe leather, you go to the events, you try the watches on, you do the proper reviews, which is what we aim to do as well. And most recently, you accompanied me across to Munich for the Karl F. Booker event, and that's where we chatted, and I said, we need to get you back on the show, and you agreed. There's been a couple of technical hitches.
Is this the third or the fourth? Is this the third or the fourth effort?
This is the fourth effort to try and record. The first time the webcam wouldn't work in his laptop. Second time the phone cut out 25% through the recording. We're now having to start again. But hey, we're here for you guys. We're here for the audience. And this guy has a lot of tales to tell. Otherwise, I would have just turned the computer off and gone for a walk. So let's get the first thing out of the way, and that is the wrist check. It's as if we've just done this about 10 minutes ago, but we're going to do it again. Let's get the wrist checks out of the way. Play along at home. Look at the show notes. That's where you'll find pictures, high-res, images, graphics, videos, links, all the good information about the watches that we're going to talk about, and ways to find out more about them, links to Instagram, YouTube, etc., etc. So Justin, hit us with it. What is on the wrist today?
I was going to say, Ricky, the expectations are high now, and we need this to be a good episode. So let's kick off with my wrist check, which is this, a brand new watch that I've recently picked up, and that camera is actually better than the previous one, so you can actually see that Roger Dubuis. It's a Roger Dubuis. It's a Homage 40, as they're known. And as the name suggests, 40 millimeters, white gold. It's a recent pickup of mine. It's one that I honestly haven't taken off the wrist. I've even slept with it on, which is controversial, but I've been sleeping with it on. And so I know that bond is deep. And the reason that I've been sleeping with it is purely because I don't have a watch winder. And I've never had a perpetual calendar before. So this perpetual calendar, hopefully, is not going to stop running anytime soon, because I really don't want to be setting it.
Well, why don't you tell us, for the listeners that maybe don't know, because we've got an audience that goes from G-Shock and Casios all the way through to, as you say, perpetual calendar. So what is a perpetual calendar?
It's one of the more significant complications in watchmaking. It's one that I've never found myself able to commit to. This one just happened to be at the right price, and it was intriguing enough design-wise and historically to get me fired up. So what we've got is we've got 2 date windows, and just below 12 o'clock, we've got the day and the month. Just down at 7 o'clock, we've got the moon phase. And in this instance, we've got a little stamp which says Bulletin d'Observatoire, which is effectively a similar test or series of tests to the Pension de Genève, which is a sort of external testing company which looks at performance and manufacturing levels and quality. This is actually a Pension de Genève movement and case as well, which is interesting. But then you then got another subdial here, which gives you the day of the month. So on the other side, you've got the day of the month. And then you've got this very bizarre, just above the 3 o'clock marker, you've got this really bizarre green little icon, and that reflects the leap year. So what we have is we've got day, date, month, year, and leap year. So all of those different elements are controlled within just this incredible little micro machine that is made up of metal working alongside itself. And in what is, to me, a very svelte package as well. It's really quite thin, white gold, which has this amazing sort of grey hue to it. And the dial on this is just outstanding. It's this creamy lacquer dial. He's layered it up. And I think it's fair to say as well, Ricky, I should have said it at the start, but Roger Dubuis, as you know it now, some people may know the brand. It's the opposite of what the brand is today. This was the days when Roger himself was a watchmaker working at his brand, and he came from Longines, he came from Patek Philippe, and he made watches that were not comparable to Richard Mille's, which they are sort of now. They look and feel more like Richard Mille's than they do Roger Dubuis, which the Roger Dubuis are always sort of quite constrained. And I gather they only made small volumes of these at a time in 37 millimeters and in 40 millimeters. So this is a 40 millimeter perpetual calendar homage from Roger Dubuis. Just a really odd watch that's got me excited.
I have an interesting story about Roger Dubuis, and that is from my first or second visit to SIHH. I think it was actually the first one, 2018. SIHH, for anyone that doesn't know, is the predecessor to what is now Watches and Wonders. It used to happen in January, and it was something cool to look forward to. They opened it up to the public in 2018, which was the year before Scottish Watches came around. So I was just Joe Average walking in off the street, and they weren't really used to having members of the public in for the last day of the event, which was the public day. The security, the staff, the technicians, the watchmakers, the press people, they were used to media folks like Justin, who's been in it a lot longer than I have. And then I swanned in on the last day and was allowed just to walk straight through into the back of their display stand. And they had these beautiful white tables. It was the collaboration with Lamborghini and Pirelli. They'd used tyres as strap material, etc., etc. And they had a fantastic movement that looked like a V8. There was lots to it. Can't remember much of the detail because what I'm about to tell you next is so shocking that it erased my memory of the previous half hour. So I'm sitting there and there's a lady next to me and she's examining this movement in the movement holder, looking at it, picking up a loop, looking a little bit closer. Then she passes it to me. And this was the fatal mistake that was made on that day. I pick it up pretending I have a clue what I'm looking at. I look at it, very nice. Then I turn it upside down to look at the underside. And the movement wasn't affixed to the holder.
No.
And the movement went, and that was probably £250,000 worth of watch movement that I managed to bounce across the floor. So that was my introduction to Roger Dubuis. Yes, but you're right, they have changed a lot in the last few years. That was still kind of the contemporary look and feel as to what we saw this year. I loved what they did at Watches and Wonders 2023 with the robot, the Boston Dynamics dogs and things in their booth. They had the new iteration of the Countach, the Excalibur, loads of things. Last year it was Knights of the Round Table that I got to see. I like that stuff. But I've also seen the elegant stuff that you've got, Excaliburs, and even the watches that had the crystal, the sapphire crystal, cut in a very specific shape, and it was very old schooly, old worldly. So when did you get that one, and what year is it?
Yeah, it's it literally I've got it in the last couple of weeks, Ricky. So, and part of the fun for me of watch collecting, I guess, because in some ways that's definitely become a big part of my life, an obsession and problem. It's fun because there's a lot to learn. So I really don't know a great deal about it. So it came as a watch only, no box and papers. And I'm desperately speaking to Roger Dubuis at the moment to try and get some information because a lot of these brands will help you if you've got a watch that you want information on. Recently, I was at Vacheron Constantin in their archives, and they've got incredible records of all their old watches. I don't know what the story is with Roger Dubuis yet, but that's part of the fun, is to try and learn a bit more about it. But yeah, it was a part exchange for some other things that I wasn't quite wearing. And you know what? It was a bit of a wild card because I'd never actually tried one on. It's certainly not one from this era. And it just really hit me, just really, really hit me. And I'm loving it. I'm absolutely loving it.
Well, that is one of the benefits of watches and getting into this hobby, because you've got a watch there you don't know anything about. We've got hundreds of years of watchmaking. We can go way, way, way back. We're never going to get bored of this hobby. And that's something, again, that is completely up front and centre with yourself. You've been doing this for far longer than me, and you're still so invigorated, so excited. And every day is a new opportunity to learn.
So you can see behind me that this is all set up just to make it look like there is a lot more to learn. All these books behind me. And it's true that there is so much still to be excited about and to learn about, because I know personally, having done it for over 10 years now, I know a fraction of what there is to know out there, that's for sure.
It's brilliant. It's like the image you've seen, the infographic, the meme, where you get into a new hobby and a couple of weeks in you think, I know everything. And then you get further in and you're like, I know all. And then you get even further in and you're like, yep, hands up. But it's fantastic. And like I say, even if there's no new emails coming through, there's no press releases about a new watch, I love going through online catalogues, say Watchfinder, say Chrono24 or Watchbox, and clicking new arrivals and just going through, not in chronological order, not by brand or by price, but just what pops up. And I've spotted watches that I have never experienced, never seen in my life before, appearing in those pages because it's a lucky dip. It's a treasure hunt, it's a jumble sale, and you can spot something that you can then learn about. And the watch that you've got on the wrist there, that's something that you're going to spend a bit of time and energy getting excited about, which is exactly what this is all about. So I'll probably tell you what I'm wearing on the wrist today. You might have seen it sneaking in a little bit down here. But yes, I am wearing a watch that's been in the vault for a number of months. I wouldn't say I forgot about it, but on this show we like to say that there's so many watches come in for review, so many brands are excited for us to talk about and see watches that we hardly get the chance to wear our own or showcase them on the show. But this is a number that I got for myself in December, just before Christmas, a little early Christmas present I'd been waiting 2 years for. So this is my Omega Speedmaster Snoopy. It's to commemorate, I believe, the Apollo 13 50th anniversary. That kind of happened around about the time we were having one of those pandemic things. So there wasn't all the hullabaloo that you would have expected, especially not like the Apollo 11 or the only other Speedmaster that I own, which is the Apollo 8 ceramic dark side of the moon. But this is a brilliant little watch. It's my colour scheme. It could almost be the Scottish Saltire colours of white and blue, although that is actually silver on the dial there. The party piece for this watch is on the back. You can't see it because it's on wrist. I'm going to cut away to a little video clip of that. The party in the back is unbelievable. I never expected Omega to do something so fun, so cool, and so exciting. You get Snoopy in his little shuttle or little rocket patrolling around the Earth in a little sort of arc. It is brilliant to watch, and the way they've executed it is absolutely spot on. That is my wrist check for today, and the reason this came out of the vault, because it's been living there since around about February, is I managed to get Simona her own Snoopy. Not one of these Omega numbers, but one of the Seiko 5 surfboard editions. So it has been his and her Snoopies on the wrist for the last week. Anyway, enough about the wrist checks, enough about my watch collection and all the rest of it. I've told enough of my stories. You're the guest, you're here. It's been a couple of years. What's been happening? Last time we spoke, you were kind of working for the Big H. Things have changed a lot. You're doing a lot more stuff. They have changed direction slightly. There's been a lot of moves and shakes when it comes to the musical chairs in the office. It's a whole new fleet of staff over there. A lot of the old faces have moved on to do their own things or join other groups. What have you been up to? What's been happening in the world of Justin Hast?
I should probably go back to the very beginning, which is that I got into it just like you as a watch lover, and things sort of spiraled out of control from there. And I started writing actually for Monochrome, watches.com, Frank Gieland over in the Netherlands, which I was very grateful for. And I'm actually not a very good writer at all, but he was kind enough to entertain that. And I then joined Revolution and then eventually Adinky. And Stephen Pulverin was the editor at the time. And so I didn't really have a great deal of interaction with their team. But they were kind enough to throw me the odd introducing article. And I was saying just on the previous take, actually, it does remind me now because very similar to the fact that I worked at McDonald's for a bit of time and they didn't let me ever do a Big Mac. They only ever let me do the quarter pounder. I don't think Adinky trusted me yet with the full week on the wrist or talking watches or any of that stuff. So yeah, and look, the business has gone through a great deal of change. The whole industry, to be fair, has gone through a massive amount of change. And a lot of the big media outlets have been sort of invested in or gobbled up kind of by bigger players, bigger outlets, bigger brands, LVMHs of the world and Chrono24s of the world. So I feel like it's a really interesting time right now, as there's a bit of a power vacuum waiting for the next big media outlet maybe to come through. And maybe it's not a big media outlet. Maybe it's more just like individuals like you or like others out there doing their own thing. So it's a really interesting time. But for me personally, still a lot of writing. I still work for magazines. So I do write for Boss Hunting, for the Jed's Journal, for The Rake, Square Mile magazine. And then more recently, because when we spoke last time, I was just starting to do the IWC videos for YouTube, mainly co-hosting them, presenting them for IWC. But since then, I've also been able to do more with other brands. So I've been able to do a bit with Vacheron, a bit with Lange, a little bit with Laurent Ferrier. And it's funny, actually, I've got my board. This is my little board of to-dos next to me. And this is my little list of things that go on. It's quite varied. I think I've got ADHD because I like variety every day. So there's a bit of photography, there's a bit of filming, there's a little bit of writing, a bit of planning, which I'm terrible at, but predominantly, like you, lots of emails about watches. And that's what's exciting. I get up every single morning excited about learning about watches, buying watches, putting myself into serious financial debt, and then hopefully being excited and being able to deliver some cool video content and other things at the same time about new watches to come.
I'm exactly the same. And I know people are addicted to TikTok. And I read a book quite a while ago about the way that social media platforms are designed. And the whole thing on Instagram where you flick down the way for it to refresh is designed to be like a one-armed bandit in Vegas, where you're pulling down and getting excited, hoping that you're going to win big. And social media and all these platforms, that's what people are like. They're looking for the next dopamine hit. I get that from my email in the morning because Switzerland's an hour ahead of Scotland, the UK, so they release all the stuff. I wake up, load up my emails, and see what new watches are coming out. And that is a continuous thing. It never gets boring. I never get tired of it. And there's always something in there that I love, even if it's an email from an auction house saying, we've got these old watches, Gerald Genta stuff, or whatever it may be. And I look at it and go, there's something I can learn about today.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. And I think I think you mentioned it prior, actually, was that even going on to Watchbox, to Watchfinder, to watch collecting, even though you're not there necessarily to buy anything, the most interesting part is seeing what has come through, what's weird, what's unusual, and then going and trying to learn a bit about that. And, despite all of these books, there's still so much to learn. And it's endless. And that's the joy of it. That is the joy of, you'll never own them all, but to have a better understanding of as many of them as possible, that's where the real fun lies, I think.
It totally is. And even taking a trip into shopping centres, which I've been doing more recently. My girlfriend is recently getting into watches as well, and she is starting ground floor. But I expected, as probably you do, you look at what you do and you expect other people to follow in your footsteps. Nobody learns the same. Nobody has got the same interest as you. And she's off in weird tangents about European watches that I've never even heard of. And she's coming up with this. Have you seen this? Have you seen that? Never. Not even on eBay. I've never seen any of this stuff. So I'm learning from somebody that's learning further down the road than me. And every day is a school day. The day you think you know everything is the day that you know nothing at all. But enough of the past. Let's talk about the present and the future. What are you doing these days? Because every time I bump into you, it's an event. As I say, it could be Munich, a Carl F. Bookerer. It could be Watches and Wonders. It could be a store launch. But every year you do a book. I keep promising to send you that picture that never quite ends up being there. I promise I'll get round to it this year, because every time I then get the book, I get annoyed with myself because I see all my friends, all my colleagues, my compatriots in there with their pictures and mine doesn't appear. So where did the idea come for the Watch Annual?
The Watch Annual was actually a lockdown project. So actually at the sort of time we first recorded, a friend of mine who's got a design agency, I said to him, it would be quite cool to do a city guide for watches. So we could do Edinburgh, we could do Leeds, we could do Manchester, London, and then Paris, New York. And that started the cycle. We then wrote a whole one on London, basically, and we got illustrations done. And then the pandemic hit, and we realized, hey, this is not the year for a watch city guide. So we pivoted, and I said, what would be quite cool is just if we could have something for the community. So if we could have a physical book, because I love having books just to hold and to enjoy. And I wondered if we could bring the whole community in and they could share their image, because a lot of people don't get the chance to do what we do, which is talk about watches every day, but they may have access, they may have bought a watch, they may have a story to tell about watch. Could we get photos from Instagram and from the community, and can we get their words, and can we put it into a book that reflected the best watches of the year? Because then there would be an opportunity to look back in 2021 and 2020, 2019, and see what the styles were, what the trend was, what people were thinking, and then have a few CEOs as well in there to write about their years, so they could tell us what they were up to that year, what was challenging, what was new. And just in the last, because we're now into our fourth year, I'm just thinking back, we've already had, I was chatting with Nicholas 2 nights ago from Fears, the CEO at Fears, and he wrote in one of our editions where he had written about getting a job at Asda, packing shelves during the pandemic just to keep some of his staff in the job. And, it's funny because you look back at those times, and the business that he's running is now in a very different place to when it was then, where it was then. And I sort of see it almost as a little bit of an almanac for the future, so people can look back on the watch world. So that is one thing we're doing. We are going to produce one this year, and we've got to have your contribution this year. It will be available on the website, so thewatchannual.com, but also we do have a special edition with Mr. Porter and Net Porter as well. And we've got some retailers around the world. So that's fun. And by the way, we don't have any adverts in there. So we don't have an advert from a watch brand. We don't have anything paid for in there. It's very much a passion thing that last year didn't yield anything, but the years before we made a little bit just on sales. But we also donate a percentage to a different cause every year as well. So we've raised money for the NHS, we've raised money for the Ukraine last year. So it's hopefully a nice thing that we can all be part of and all have a bit of ownership of every year. I am doing another book. I've just done a book, actually, funny enough, on pre-owned for Buchera. Well, not a book. I've contributed a chapter to a book that Buchera have just or about to publish. I'm doing another book for a brand, an independent brand called Resonance, which are a really unusual independent watch manufacturer. I do have one around. I don't have it with me, unfortunately, but I'm doing something for their 12-year anniversary. I'm producing a kind of a coffee table book with Stephen Pulverin, funny enough, my old colleague from Hodinkee. So together we're publishing that with Resonance, mainly looking at all of the watches they've ever made and trying to produce a book that showcases for their collectors everything they've ever done. And that's proving to be great fun.
Okay, I'll jump in, and for the benefit of the listeners that don't know anything about Resonance, tell me, what is the story? I've seen the watches, and I think they don't exist. That it's fake, it's a prop, because it doesn't make any sense to me how all that stuff can rotate round. So give us the bottom line.
You've got to play a visual over my mug here, Ricky, just so people can see the thing in action, because it's only once you see the watch in action, sped up, that or set in, setting it, do you realize how nuts it is. It's founded by a Belgian guy who was an industrial designer called Benoit Mintens. He's an amazing guy. And he thought that traditional watchmaking was weird because you had to teach children how to read these two hands and tell the time. So his idea was that actually you should have subdials that give you information and a central hand, a long hand, that gives you minutes. So all you kind of always know what hour you're in, but you just want a quick readout, an instant readout, how far through the hour you're in. So the minute hand is this large hand that sweeps around the dial. But then as that sweeps around, you've then got these other subdials that give you subseconds, temperature of the oil, because the watch has oil in it, and then the hour. And those subdials rotate around and they orbit the dial, and they never cross. So the hands never cross. And it's just a very, very unusual design that is also really quite functional and also stand out. They're an amazing brand. And if you ever get the chance to see one or to handle one, I definitely urge people to do it because they're a special thing.
I think you've just been lying to me and it's all magic.
Well, here's the magic bit. Some of them, so there's a type 1, there's a type 2, type 3, type 5, type 8. Some of them have oil. So some of them have oil, about 5 milliliters of oil, and it looks very much like an iPhone display or a Samsung display, like a liquid. And don't get me started on the technical because I'm useless, as you know, on tech. But it looks and feels a bit like an Apple sort of display. So some people look at them and think they're actually not mechanical because they look just like a digital watch or a smartwatch, but their dial is like nothing else. And in fact, the Type 5, their dive watch, is the very first dive watch ever that you can read at any angle underwater because of its curvature on the dial and its liquid dial. It gets no sheen. Typically the glass sheens over at different angles on the water. This thing you can see at any angle. If you're a diver, which most aren't and most will never do, but if you're a diver and you want a dive watch that you can read at any angle, the Type 5 from Resonance is one of them. It's the first one, and it's now I think it's the only one as well. But amazing brand, and it's one of my favorites. So I'm sinking my teeth into writing that book at the moment, which I'm loving.
The only other watches I know that are oil filled off the top of my head would be U-boats, but they usually have a little air bubble, which I'm not 100% on, and Zinn, they do some cool oil-filled watches. And you're right, because of the way it works, if you try and look at something that's glass underwater, the refractive index completely changes and it looks like a mirror. But if it's actually filled with a liquid all the way through in the volume, then you can see things. And the Resonance watch, I don't understand how they work. They remind me of some of horology's greatest hits in my mind. And that's watches where you have to think once how to tell the time, but from that point forward, it becomes second nature. I can talk about our work. We can talk about wandering hour complications from them and other brands. You can even talk about the Mad One from MB&F, Mad Galleries, where once you explain it to someone, it makes complete sense. Or HYT. Once that was explained to me how the HYT method of telling time was, it totally makes sense, and it almost makes a dial or a digital display secondary.
There is a bit of heat out there these days for sort of reissues or homages to old designs. And the truth is, the independents particularly have been amazing at developing these completely new ways of showcasing the time. And we have to celebrate that because they're pushing the envelope out. And I have to say as well, when you speak to some of them, if you ever get the chance to meet these guys and women who are behind these brands, they put so much on the line to build these businesses with very little guarantee of success. And it's incredible to think that, and you're investing in them. When you buy one of their watches, you truly are investing in them. By the way, I'm not on any commission for Essence, but you are truly investing in them, and you then allow them to continue to do that. So it's amazing. It's really amazing. They're artists. They're artists.
They totally are. And that's why I love going to the events and getting to see them. In a couple of weeks' time, I'll be going across to Geneva Watch Days, and my entire week is booked up with visiting the likes of Moser, Altlance, De Bethune, all these independents, Trilobe, Burn watches, some that have appeared recently, but again with amazing complications, and it's complications of telling time. It's not minute repeaters, grand sonneries, or perpetual calendars. We're talking ways of displaying time in unique ways, and that's what watches are to me. It's all about fun. Like I said, on the back of this Snoopy, there's a bit of fun in there. Watches they're superfluous. You don't need them anymore. We keep saying that in the show. It's jewellery, but it's also art and a bit of form function mixed in there. Before we even get into some of the Blancpain unique pieces with the little automatons doing funny things on the dial.
Yeah, 100%.
Let's move away from the adult content back into normalcy. What else have you been up to then? Because you've been doing some videos, you've been doing some podcasting, you've been doing writing, photography. What is a day in the life of Justin at the moment?
Depends who you ask, eh? You ask the wife, she thinks, and this is a quote, direct quote, is that it's a jolly. That's the exact quote. You've just been on another jolly.
Oh, okay.
If you ask one of the clients, they might say, when does this guy sleep? I don't know. It's like it's varied. Every day is varied. I'm editing some video right now with some colleagues of mine. So just shot a video for Langer and Zunner. We shot a video a couple of weeks ago at the Prince's Trust because they raised £1 million for the Prince's Trust through the sale of a watch at auction recently. I was in Geneva recently shooting for Laurent Ferrier, so producing some film for them, talking through their after-sales process, which was amazing because they're another brand that I have a deep love for, another independent that is probably the most elegant watchmaker in the world.
Give us a little bit of history then, because you're an untapped treasure trove at the moment, and I think our audience would love to hear some of. We mentioned these names. Oh, Laurent Ferrier have got a new watch out. Who the hell are they? Is that a guy that died 300 years ago? Is he still alive? Give us a bit of info.
He looks every part the watchmaker. He looks every inch what you would want your watchmaker to look like. He is a lovely man. He's actually a passionate. He's very much alive. He's an older gen, but he's a passionate racing driver. He actually raced in Le Mans at the same time as Steve McQueen. He actually came third back in the 70s. But he's a passionate racing driver. He then spent many, many years at Patek in their complications department and their servicing department. And he, during his time as a racing driver, he actually promised to his partner that he was racing with that one day they would make a watch together. And when the time was right, he left Patek and he set up his own brand a decade or two ago now. And they are very much the most refined. I think his eye for design is right at the top of the tree. They're expensive. They are expensive, but the finishing is second to none. I remember I used to hang around in William & Son here in London, and they used to literally have to shut me out because all I wanted to do was look at the De Bethunes, the Urwerks, the FB Journes, the Laurent Ferriers, and just see the finishing of the movements because it was just something like I'd never seen in my life before. So Laurent Ferrier prides itself on a gallet case, like in French, for the French speakers out there, that's like a pebble. So it's like a little pebble. And it's beautiful. It's about 40. It's 40 millimeters, and it sits in your hand, and it feels very organic. It looks very organic, and it's got real curvature to it. And he's got this little onion crown that he uses, which is his trademark as well. And then if you look at the dials, the hands, the markers, It's so beautifully simple and elegant. And then the movement on the back, he's got a natural escapement, and he's got the finishing on there. He's got Cote de Genève, but he's got anglage, he's got beveling, he's got the depth is quite remarkable. Now they design their own movements. They have them come in from an outside party in a kit, and then they've got a team of 20, 30 people in Geneva that manufacture, put them all together, and finish these things. And yeah, Laurent Ferrier, one of my absolute favorite brands, and I hope that someone goes away and looks at them and falls in love like I did a decade ago.
Is it still the case that the watches that they bring out pretty much are sold out by the time the press release hits the newswire?
You know, these guys, we've got to remember that the volumes that they make are tiny, and they've got one or two retailers around the world who expect delivery first, who've probably got a long list of clients that want them already. And we saw that with Laurent Ferrier recently when they launched their sports watch called the Sport Auto in titanium, 41 millimeter titanium watch, which is absolutely beautiful. I actually have ordered one. So I have talked about it before, actually, but I ordered one last year, not the Sport Auto, but just the Blue Origin. So it's a titanium 40 millimeter dress watch in titanium, which I think is super cool. And then a blue dial, but it's got a gradient blue dial. And I ordered that last year. And so it's 2 years of waiting. So next year I'll get it. And I couldn't be happier to have been waiting, because that means to me that it shows to me that the business is in good health. It's not looking to get much bigger. It's just looking to honor the current volumes, which might be into the low hundreds. I don't even think it's that. And yeah, they're cracking on. So I'm excited next year about picking that watch up.
I have heard nothing but good things, and you have continued that tradition today for me. Well, what other brands have been standouts for you? It has been a number of years since you were on the show. I'm putting you on the spot. I do realise this, but over the past 2 to 3 years, who have you seen that have kind of flourished? They've come from nowhere, or they have really pushed forward and exceeded all your expectations. Who are the guys that you really would sort of champion and shout about these days?
Straight off the bat, the first one that comes to mind is Vacheron Constantin, the oldest watchmaker in continuous production. 1755, I think they were founded. Don't quote me on that. I think it's 1755. 250 plus years this business has been around, which is just nuts. I've always loved the brand, but it's no secret that a couple of years ago, and speaking to friends who worked at Richemont at the time, you know, Vacheron were very much at the bottom of their presentation, their annual presentation on their performance. And it was really quite sad, because this is this old watchmaker that kind of made very, very beautiful things, but spoke in a similar way to the watches, in the way that it was old school and it wasn't connecting with the audience. And what's happened in the last couple of years is Vacheron have really started speaking to a younger audience and have become so relevant in the public domain across music, across, you know, I mean, Brad Pitt was wearing a Vacheron 222 at the F1 the other day in the UK, the British Grand Prix. You've got guys at the on the basketball courts wearing Vacheron from the music scene. They've been able to translate in some ways, like AP have a couple of years ago. They were able to get into the culture world, and Vacheron have done that. So to me, Vacheron have just been outstanding in the last few years.
I would agree with you, because I've got a friend, listeners to the show, I'm not going to drop him in it with his wife, because we just had the whole wife thinks people are on a jolly when it comes to watches. He is selling some of his heavy hitting pieces, some of his Rolexes, because he's now on a waiting list for an overseas. And 3-4 years ago, nobody cared. And there has been a distinct change in the way that the perception of the public, the watch collector, and even the man in the street who never knew who Vacheron were, because of Ed Sheeran, because of this guy, that guy, Brad Pitt, even though I thought he was some kind of Breitling brand ambassador, never mind, doesn't matter. Yeah, because of all that stuff, people are paying attention. And was it called the Everest, the Overseas Everest? There was like a limited edition, and then they brought a version of that out. I absolutely love these watches. I got to be there with you, again, where I met you up in Edinburgh at the launch of the boutique. And because it was a star-studded night, and they invited me and you along, obviously, we got to see these fantastic pieces. It wasn't just what you would normally find in a boutique or a retailer. They brought the big guns, and they even had a watchmaker in the corner working on one of their movements. And it's just mesmerising to see the level of quality, all the bits that they've got inside it. And if that said Patek, if that said any other big brand on there, the price would be double.
There's a report that comes out from the Swiss industry every year, and you get to see exports. In fact, it's not just Switzerland, because Langer feature on there as well. So it's exports to the watch industry, and Patek have actually been overtaken in the last couple of years. And I feel lucky to like you do, to handle these watches. And I would say that Vacheron product to me is of the same level as Patek, if not higher. I honestly believe that. And I honestly believe that Lange from Germany, another fascinating brand for anyone who hasn't come across them before, probably some of the finest finishing at volume, at relative scale of, say, 3 to 4 to 5,000 watches a year. So the volume that they produce, no one touches them for finishing at that level.
Do you know what Langer means in Irish?
I don't actually. Does it mean dick?
Yes, it does. It genuinely does.
Does it? There you go. I didn't know that. But we'll keep that one to ourselves, so Mr. Schmidt and the team aren't aware of that. So when they open up the boutique in Dublin at some point soon, that they're not embarrassed with any graffiti on the outside. But yeah, they are an outstanding watchmaker. And I have to say, handling some of their stuff recently, I think to myself, I don't know that anyone can actually touch them for quality right now. It's pretty outrageous. Like holding a datograph, like a triple split datograph, or a Lange one, a platinum. I mean, just the quality is next level. And I think, I hate to say it, but and I'm not hitting on Patek here at all, but they have to pull their socks up a little bit, because they have had this incredible position of being at the very top of the industry for a long time. You look at the results at auction, of course, Patek are sort of right at the top there. But when we go into their boutiques at the events, they're very old school, and look at the differences stark between the experience at Vacheron, the experience at Lange, the experience at F. Bijoux, the experience at De Bethune, or these brands are very much, and AP, because AP have done an amazing job in the last few years as well. They are very much treading on the heels of Patek, and I think Patek needs to be ruffled a little bit, just because we all care, we all want the best for them.
Who am I to say? But I will say they are almost resting on the laurels a little bit. And this is the final dial change colour, wink wink, until next month. That has played out a little bit recently, and we've seen AP code 1159 pushing that. Maybe it didn't quite land initially, but they're nice looking watches. And more recently, as a swan song, we've said on the show before, the superheroes, the Marvels, the Black Panther, the Spider-Man, things that you normally 5-10 years ago would never have thought AP would do. Even the Daytona this year with the clear case back and the bubbles and the puzzles and the emojis from Rolex. It has changed days, but Patek are digging their heels in.
Totally agree. I was thinking actually after we spoke in Munich about the Marvel link with AP, because we had someone at our table who had very close links with in fact, we had the gentleman who wrote
the book on it.
He wrote the book on the Royal Oak, which is just that shoulder there. And we had him at the table, and so it was interesting just to pick his brain about that. Highly recommend the book, so do pick that up. And he, I was thinking, imagine if Patek did something like that. Imagine them doing something in the Nautilus with a really complicated enamel 3D something. I mean, it would be nuts, and I don't think we would see it from them. But I think in some ways they should be rolling the dice a little bit more. That's my gut feel.
People are getting older. The old guard are moving on. We need to capture new eyeballs, and this is something that me and Dave talk about in the show. That the Apple Watch has kind of done. It's opened up younger people wearing things on the wrist. Initially thinking Apple are funky, Apple are cool, I can show off. It's better than a Fitbit or a Garmin. And then leading into automatics and mechanical movements. And AP have done it. Vacheron are doing it with the overseas, putting on different types of straps. Maybe Patek, you're right, maybe Patek should be looking there. But let's move away from Patek. Let's move away from the old guard, the Holy Trinity, all those kind of guys. What other independents have caught your eye, apart from Laurent Ferrier, Resonance? Is there any other? Is there maybe some one-man bands or some new blood in the industry that have come through that maybe are untapped? People don't know about them, but they're just going to kind of break through the surface.
Yeah, I was at a Baltic event because they recently opened up here in London, and I have to say this French micro brand are doing some amazing stuff. Their sort of founder CEO Etienne is just a really cool guy who has got a great eye for design, and they're effectively, I would say, a design studio first and a watchmaker second, because they're making some really beautiful things. They've got some dive watches that are 38 millimeters with really beautiful dials. They've got dress watches with beautiful Milanese bracelets at affordable prices as well. They're using movements that, are not expensive, but give you the joy of owning a mechanical watch, but you've got great design there that doesn't put you into a hole, that you can wear on holiday, that you can wear running, swimming, at dinner. You've got the whole thing. So Baltic would be up there for me for sure. I do think Farah. I think Farah as a brand are really cool. I love their use of color. They are probably the most colorful, fun-loving um, British brand I can think of. They're a really great bunch of guys, and I fell in love with their dive watch that they launched recently. And Anne Ordain, I couldn't not mention Anne Ordain on the Scottish Watches podcast. I've loved what they've done for a long time as well, and I think their dials are something really special. And I've got a few friends. Oh no, what was it? I did an interview actually with a friend for YouTube, and he was waiting for his Anne Ordain to arrive, and he had been waiting some time because the dial had been taking some time to produce. So yeah, I think there's a lot of real creativity out there. I think Rebecca Struthers, those three brands, Farah, Baltic, and Anne Ordain at a certain price point, which is more approachable, which is very important for all of us as collectors and enthusiasts. But then you've also got someone like Rebecca Struthers, who's just this incredible historian. She's a watchmaker, she's a restorer, and she has worked on her own watches for a few years now, and she makes very, very few, but they're almost bespoke. And she also restores and decorates old Omega calibers in a way that is just remarkable. So I urge people to check out her work because she's remarkable. And thankfully, we're seeing a lot more women coming through in the industry with their own creative input. And actually, the lady you commented on there at the Vacheron event was, for a lot of people who walked in on that night, wouldn't have expected, I don't think, to see a young watchmaker, female watchmaker with bright pink hair working for Vacheron. And that, to me, says everything about the good stuff that's happening in the industry and the evolution that's happening out there, that people want to get in the industry. They see it as a creative outlet.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I've had the pleasure of spending time with somebody who grew up literally 5 miles from where I'm recording this just now, and that's Fiona Kruger, and she is just a powerhouse. She was over in Dubai. It's weird, isn't it? She was born, raised round the corner. Met her in Dubai for the first time. The second time I met her was in New York. It's very odd, this whole watch game. But she is just so switched on when it comes to not just design and watchmaking, but artistry. It's just incredible listening to her speak about what drives her, the passion, where her ideas come from. And she is so bang up to date. She's younger than me and she's absolutely flying. And she was even giving a guy a hard time about NFTs back when the NFT hype was still kicking around, and I never bought into that. I was always on the show saying, yeah, Emperor's New Clothes, you just watch what happens next. And what happened next was exactly what I predicted would happen next. Ta-da!
Yeah.
But anyway, Fiona Kruger, other people, when I've been across and I've done factory tours, for instance, with Adrian over at JLC, we got to meet a woman who in her spare time went down to the dungeons in the JLC factory, found an old machine that would do, not even guillocheting, it was a special version of guillocheting, and only this one machine could do it. And it was sitting there in disrepair. And she spent her nights and her weekends coming in on her own dime to learn, to work, to just grasp this knowledge of 100-year-old technology when everyone else is using CNC and lathes and things. And she just worked at this thing tirelessly. And the results, once she got it back up and running, and it was a perfectly working machine from a couple of 100 years ago, it was incredible to see the results and see the passion in her eyes as she was operating it. So yeah, I'm really glad that there are so many forthright, forward-thinking, current, brilliant minds in the watch game that are female, and long may it continue.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just excited that a younger group of people are seeing value in watches, and that, in some ways, I sort of see our objective being one that does inspire the next generation to come through, to want to buy them, to want to buy into the artistry of them, to get people to work in the industry. Because I think there actually is an issue at the moment with, skilled watchmakers in the UK specifically, getting the volumes of watchmakers through. I hope that the interest, broadly speaking, where people are far more interested in watches now than they've ever been before, I hope that translates into more young people going into watches in different formats as well, because that's important.
What we've heard through the grapevine is that problem, and it's a knock-on effect of watches nowadays, I think it's due to social media, are popular again. But it takes a decade or more to skill up somebody to become a professional watchmaker, over and above changing a battery or doing a simple basic service, which even that takes a long time to perfect. So there is this glut and a gap in the market where people don't exist quite yet. But you mentioned there about the UK, and I believe you're kind of involved in the Alliance of British Watch and Clockmakers as well, something to do with your book, maybe?
I'm an honorary member, I think, actually, which I'm touched about. I did host the conversation recently for the launch of the Fears edition that they did together with the Alliance, the Jump Hour, which was really cool. Hopefully, we have a lot of British brands in there as well. So that's a key thing. A lot of British input into the book, a lot of contributors from British from the British Isles, and then hopefully a lot of British watches in there as well. So yeah, super cool. But Warwick, what are your micro brands? Tell me, have you got one or two micro brands that you're really impressed with?
Don't you hate it when people use your own weapons against you? Who do I like? Everybody. We've got an auction that most people are probably bored to death hearing about that hasn't started yet, but that was predominantly micro brands, independents, here in the UK with a couple of foreigners that kind of crept in at the last minute. But again, like you mentioned, Anne or Dane, they do things at a price point where they're almost putting themselves out of business in my head, because they could put an extra zero in the end and collectors would pay it. They could double, triple, no problem at all. Guys would go for it. They've got waiting lists of 3+ years. Then you've got Rich at Studio Underdog, who is a one-man band, young guy. We had him on the show, and I remember the first interview we did with him was the day after, I believe he was robbed twice in one day. Somebody stole his phone, and the same day somebody broke into his house and stole his watches. And he came on and he recorded a show. He didn't let us down because we'd booked it in. And that is the measure of the guy. And he was one of the first people as well to get involved in our charity watch auction, created a custom dial, popped it in his Instagram, and it caught fire. So there's people like that, right the way through to Max Busser. I don't know if you can call them a micro brand. They don't produce a lot, but the stuff they do produce is fantastic. And again, when we were nobodies, when we first started speaking to you and we had a couple of thousand listeners versus what we're at just now, he was speaking to us like a normal person would. There was no airs or graces, there was no pomposity. He had the time to spend with me as he had the time to spend with a billionaire that was looking to buy 10 of his watches. And there's not a bad brand out there. There's nobody that I can think of. So instead of saying which micro brands do I like, the list would be shorter saying which micro brands do I dislike, because there are hardly any that I can actually put my finger on.
Yep, agreed.
Did I manage to skirt that one quite well, yeah?
Yeah, no, you did a great job. It just got me thinking, because there are so many, and it's hard to actually pinpoint, because the minute you start talking about them, you remember that there's a lot more than you can think of.
Well, I'm speaking to Katya, who runs the Alliance day to day. That is her gig. And obviously you've got Christopher Ward, Mike France at the helm, along with Roger Smith, the other co-founder, Alistair behind the scenes. And we're in constant communication because I help out with the Alliance podcast. I co-host with her. It's her baby. And she's every day saying to me, there's this new brand that's joined. There's a brand I didn't know about in the UK that's joined. There's this company, there's that company. I think in their list, they've currently got 81 different brands in the UK that create watches. And that could be completely in-house within the UK, like your Roger Smiths, or it could be a micro brand that perhaps buys in inexpensive Seagull movements, which are still fantastic and they work, and put them in their watches like Rich at Studio Underdog. Or you've got Jose at Isotope, and you've got Johnny at Williamwood Watches, you've got Nicholas Bowman Scargill at Fears, like you mentioned. There are just so many, and they're always doing something cool. And this is something that I've seen within the watch industry, predominantly in the UK, but when I go to Dubai, when I go to different places, I see it kind of spread out across the world. There are no competitors within watches. Everyone is a collaborator or a friend or a comrade, because they all help each other out. They recommend each other. There's none of this car companies hating each other, computer companies, technology companies hating each other. It doesn't seem to exist in the watch world.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that the mark of that actually was this week. I went to a Baltic event at the studio, and Nicholas was there, and Rich from Studio Underdog was there. So that says everything you need to know about the fact that there's a real energy about it. Then again, actually, if you think about it, I don't know. I don't know, but I gather there is some of the bigger boys in the UK, some of the older guard from the manufacturing sides, the Christopher Wards and the Bremonts. There's always been a little bit of natural competition there and a bit of head to head, which is spicy by all accounts, and that's fantastic as well. That's part of the story. But I think ultimately, I don't see benefit personally in conflict. I think, collaboration, working together and, learning, sharing, growing. I think we can do it together. I really don't see it as a serious something where if you guys make a sale today, it takes away a sale from us. I don't see that.
No, because a watch collector is somebody that collects watches. A buyer today is a buyer of another brand tomorrow, or potentially another buyer of your brand in the future. So it's always nice to be nice. And it's kind of similar with the media landscape because I could be taking away views and audience by bringing you onto the show because people go and look at your Instagram, suddenly start watching your videos. And if they're spending an hour with you, they could be taking an hour away from me, but I don't see it that way. And the people that have helped me, it's almost like paying it forward. The people that helped me in the beginning, like Adrian from Bark and Jack, who to this day is a fantastic friend, collaborator, and he's helped us out dramatically when it comes to setting up this mini studio. I spent a couple of hours chatting to Andrew from Watchfinder because when he found out we were going to be doing the video thing, he says, I will give you some training. Just tell me when. I'll jump on a Zoom call. I'll explain how this works and that works, all the pitfalls I've fallen into and the ones I've narrowly avoided. And these are people offering their help. And I don't see that in any other industry. You don't see magazine publishers helping other magazine publishers or guesting in different publications. It just doesn't happen.
You know the car industry really well, so I'm always fascinated with the comparison between the two. And speaking to a brand the other day about what the car shows are like versus the watch shows, it sounds like it's a whole different beast and much bigger. But also, yeah, there's the variety of characters is broader, and there maybe isn't quite that camaraderie that we're lucky enough to have in the watch industry. But I might be wrong.
Well, I'll tell you a little story. I learned this one on a recent trip, and I'm not going to name the trip or the people involved, but as I just said there, when it comes to watch stuff, industry, companies, collaborators, media, they're very much helpful. There's a lot of collaboration back and forward. I keep seeing it like MB&F are partnering with Moser that are partnering with such and such. Even different magazines like Monochrome, Fratello, Time and Tide, they all help each other out. They all collaborate. They all report on each other's products. It's insane when you think about it. But I heard when you're talking about cars that there was some car influencer, YouTubers, that were so caustic with each other when they ended up in the same trip, they were actually waiting for people to record their footage, get their content together. Then they were stealing the memory cards out of the cameras.
No, really?
This was during a conversation about things, just how murky that area, and that's not even car manufacture where there's industrial espionage and Dieselgate and all the horrible stuff and all the stuff about EVs. This was YouTubers, bloggers, guys that are in the creative content space where me and you get on. They don't seem to get on whatsoever.
I don't know. Is it because the market's more mature and maybe there's more to play for? I mean, I don't know. I feel like the watch industry's still growing, and I think we've had this amazing growth in the last few years. But I'd like to think that even if it were the same size as the car space, then we wouldn't be behaving like that.
I think it's the audience. Because somebody that will spend 1 hour listening to me and you prattle on about wristwatches that are from brands from the 1700s right through to modern day is different from somebody that will watch a 1 minute TikTok about a Ferrari when they're age 10. And every view counts. If you look at a YouTuber that creates content on cars and they've got 1 million views on it, that's not 1 million people that are interested in buying a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. But if you watch a YouTube video for an hour on watch content, like you are watching us just now or you are listening to us just now, there's a very good chance that you buy the stuff that we're talking about, that you are intrinsically linked into this stuff. You have a keen interest and it's not a passing fascination. And I think that's probably where the difference is. Because these guys are cannibalizing each other, they're fighting each other for eyeballs, clicks, and all the rest of it. We're not. We are here to disseminate current information, and like the wristwatch that you checked at the start of the show, to disseminate information from the past and bring it to a new eager audience.
No, I think that's so true, and even internationally as well, because we get to go on these trips, and like the Munich one for Carlos Bucher recently that we were on.
These jollies that you were talking about earlier.
The jollies, God, what was it? It really didn't look good the other day. There was. Oh God! The worst bit was I got back from that trip, and then Oris, who sponsor Oris, are doing a great job by the way as well. Oris are a great independent that people should be aware of. Oris sponsor Lord's Cricket Ground, and the day after I got back from the Carlo Bucher run, I was actually invited to go and play in the Oris cricket team. So the photos from that event, my wife did see, and so that really was just the optics. I think the politicians used the word optics. The optics did not look good for the last 48 hours. That's all I'll say. But just go back to the point briefly on the fact that it's also international. We had guys from Asia, we had women from Europe, Germany, France, Switzerland in that group with us. And there's a lovely camaraderie across the borders as well, which is even after our exit from Europe, they still spoke to us.
They did. And it was great chatting with you, Rob Corder, Lara from LM Communications. There wasn't anybody who didn't get on with somebody else. There was no negativity at the table, and there was multiple tables. And you're saying it's a jolly, and that is a bit of a laugh. It was a hard slog because there's a term I keep hearing that this meeting could have been an email and certain trips could have been a PDF. But the benefit you get, even if you're only going to an afternoon presentation where you're getting shuttled in, there's a bus, there's a train, there's an airplane to get to an event for a couple of hours, and then it's all the way back. Some of them are jollies, some of them are hard work, and some of them you have to really put the legwork in to get the benefit from. But that trip there, just catching up with you guys, and even sitting at the table with Rob Corder, the day or the night that we launched our first video podcast, he went away and created an article, and it wasn't one paragraph. He had screen captures, he had comments from the people that had watched the video. He did a really good job for us, and then it got us back talking after meeting at Watches and Wonders this year in the shuttle bus. And I said, it's been too long. You need to come on to the show. And the problem we've got right now is we're at the end of the show. So you're going to have to come back again. Hopefully not in a couple of years' time, but a little bit sooner, because I'm definitely going to be sending you a picture, at least one picture for the annual this year, because I keep getting it. I said it earlier on, and I leaf through it and I'm like, my photo should be in here. Yeah, my photo should be in here. And they're fantastic. I'm not putting anyone else out, but I'm just super jealous because it's a brilliant book and I'm really looking forward to seeing the next iteration of it.
Rick, thank you very, very much for having me. But before you go, you've got to tell me what's the one watch this year that if you could choose and reserve for the book that's been your one standout watch that was launched this year, what would it be?
I hate questions like this. It's like when you're walking across a road blind drunk and you turn and headlights are staring you down from the truck and you're like, your whole life goes in front of you. I've got Watches and Wonders. I've got everything, every email that's come through in the last 8 months. I cannot possibly comment. So I wouldn't want to put anybody out. I wouldn't want any of my friends in the watch industry to think I was picking favourites.
I tell you what we should do. This is what we should do. And I was hoping that was kind of going to be your answer. We should get people to comment underneath in the YouTube, if they're watching on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, guys, comment underneath as to what the standout watch from this year, from 2023, had to be launched this year that Ricky should consider to be in the Watch Annual 2023. Because I think that would be fascinating, because I will definitely miss things and I don't want to. So let's get them in there. That'll be fascinating.
I'll give you a cheat sheet. This is what I do. At the end of every year, we do the Watch Annual in audio format, and this year it'll be audio and visual format. I cheat because what I do is I go through our Instagram page and I go back and I go, oh yeah, that one, this one, that one. Because between myself, Mizzy L, Philologus, Ralph, Mark, the full suite of the Scottish Watches team, any watch that we care about will end up in our grid. So it just takes maybe half an hour of scrolling and screenshotting for us to figure out exactly what was what. Because it's like one of those things, if I was to say to you, looking at me just now and not looking behind you, name every book you've got there, you wouldn't be able to. But if I said to you, do you happen to have the Royal Oak book? You would go, yes, I do. So that's the way that the human mind works, and we ain't going to be able to fight that. But we're going to fight people and tell them they need to. We're going to strong arm them. They need to go and check you out on Instagram, on your website. So do you want to tell the good folks where they can find you?
Oh, God, geez. Yeah, so Instagram, just at Justin Hast. Took me a long time to secure that one. I was negotiating with a guy to buy that for a long time. Probably paid far too much for it because I used to be at justin.hast. And so then I'm on YouTube. Then I am on YouTube and I do a little series called the Two Watch Collection. And Ricky, you'll have to come on that at some point where I sit down with one guest and we just talk about two of their watches. So not their whole collection, but just two watches that they, and that's just Justin at Justin Hast as well. And then the website, justinhast.com, is just like a bit of a portfolio of the updated articles and stuff that I'm writing and other bits and pieces. So thanks, guys. Very, very kind of you to have me on again. And round 3 soon.
Oh, definitely. And for anybody that may be interested, do you have prior editions of the Watch Annual still for sale? The 2020, the 21, 22?
Yeah. It's they're actually all up on the website. So thewatchannual.com. And it's fun because we always find that someone who buys this year's edition or last year's edition tends to always buy the previous year as well. And I think you'll probably see, we hope you'll see an improvement in the delivery year on year. The first year was 40 watches, 40 contributors from around the world. The year after was about 80 and 100 watches. And then the next year was 100 contributors from the world and about 140 watches. So it's hopefully evolving and getting better and better year after year. So thank you very much for the support.
It is really good. I'm genuinely not bullshitting. It is well worth a look because every page is different. Every picture is in a different style because the contributors are all different. Heartily recommend it. I will definitely send you a picture. I will come across and I will appear on your podcast, on your YouTube channel. I will return the favour and then you can come back on here in a few months' time. Are you going to Geneva Watch Days?
You know what, Ricky? I was desperately trying to do, but we're going away for 1 week this summer, and the 1 week we're away is the same week as Watch Days.
Well, I'll tell you a little handy hint. This is what I've done. I'm taking her with me.
Tried that. I've tried that, and I've failed. So we'll discuss that next time.
Fair enough. Too many jollies, I understand. But no, it's been phenomenal having you back on. It's been far too long. It will not be this long until the next time you're on the show. So thank you very much. And if you want to check out what we're up to, follow us on Instagram. We are at Scottish Watches. We didn't have to buy that off anybody. Read something recently that since Elon decided to rename Twitter to X, the guy that had the handle X from like 2006, 2007 got bumped. Didn't even get paid for it. They just took his handle and told him to pee off. But anyway, you can catch us on Instagram. We're on YouTube, Scottish Watches. If you're watching the video, a like, a sub and a notification click would be fantastic. If you're listening to the podcast, we're out twice a week, Mondays and Thursdays. It's always a mixed bag. You never know what you're going to get. Life is a box of chocolates, as Tom Hanks once said. And that is pretty much us. So thanks, Justin, for coming on, and we'll catch you guys again soon.